Welcome back, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in to Mori's presentation. I mean, what a rich conversation, Doreen. Like, these are ideas that I have been thinking about but haven't had the words to vocalize. So that was a really, really great discussion.
Definitely. And I think it is very powerful to now move into Tiara's presentation because I think it's a nice way of connecting with this idea of, making new metaphors, building new worlds, imagining new places, or ways also of connecting, say, certain traditions and stories and identities and figures and move that beyond to other conversations as well. And I think yeah, definitely this is a perfect way of following up the conversation and perhaps actually looking into a perfect example of what I was just talking about, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, we won't do too much more. We'll turn it over to Tiare. I want to just tell you a little bit about her first. Tiare Ribeaux is a Hawaii Maoli interdisciplinary artist and filmmaker based here in the Bay Area, as well as Honolulu. And she's the founder and artistic director of Babe Lab Gallery, as well as a co-founder of Refresh. As an artist, her work employs storytelling and visual narrative to make visible social and ecological imbalances while imagining more regenerative futures. And she also explores how both our bodies and the technologies we use are entangled with the environment. She's interested in recentering Indigenous technology and stories that include Indigenous narratives and the experience of Kanaka Maoli diaspora. With that, we will turn it over to you, Tiare. Welcome, and thanks so much for being here with us today.
Yeah, it's an honor to be here. Thank you so much for having me, and really excited to share a few projects about my practice that really kind of explore the themes of the conference in terms of worlding, symbiotic systems, interspecies relationships, and protocols that I'm sure that are all tied into kind of the interconnection of things. So as Wade mentioned, I'm an interdisciplinary artist with an emphasis on film, as well as installation and digital art. And it's a really hybrid practice, so I'll be moving between a few different mediums that hopefully you all see the connective tissue between the projects. So I'm going to start with an introduction to Babe Lab, which is a community space that I've helped run for 7 years. I'm one of the co-founders, and we're really a venue and gallery and community space for artists who create new media and digital art, kind of as a whole spectrum of work. And we try to stay hyper local, but we also bring in artists from different parts of the continent. And we're located in Oakland, and we just reopened, so look out for us in the future. In terms of my personal practice, I wanted to start with the project Cyanovisions, which is a body of work that's really spent 2 years of research and explored different kind of mediums of installation, film, and was a highly collaborative project and as well as kind of a world building project that I hope to keep expanding. It explores speculative mutualisms with cyanobacteria in an age of climate collapse, and really aims to reposition the framing of ourselves to other species, in this case cyanobacteria, and our interconnectedness to them. Cyanobacteria were the first species or organisms to photosynthesize on the planet, which ultimately created the oxygen we breathe, and complex diverse systems as we know it today. Now we're kind of seeing this in this cyclical way, humans generating toxic algal blooms, which is due to kind of like systems of different industrial and pollution and just kind of resource management type stuff. And we also we're creating new life in terms of synthetic biology, genetic engineering, and artificial life. So Cyanovisions really posits potentials for biological hybridities that recognize this inextricable relationship of humans to other organisms. So I'm going to play a really short clip of part of the film, which is co-directed by Jodie Stillwater. And I'm going to do a quick change of my tab so you can hear the audio. Okay, I'm switching tabs back. This was really the only way to share audio with you guys, so thanks for your patience. So yeah, it's a 15-minute film if you have time to check it out. There's animations that go into it as well. And it's been shown as both a single channel video in film festivals as well as an installation where you can kind of look at the organisms, the cyanobacteria, kind of under the microscope and really kind of look at the different forms that they take as biofilms. I've shown it kind of in a very different kind of setups, including in the exhibition Lux Aeterna, which means eternal life. As a practice, including oh, okay. Hi everyone, I'm back. So perfect timing, about to talk about my next project, which is called, which involves both a website called the Bioplastic Cookbook for Ritual Healing from Petrochemical Landscapes, which was part of a web residency with Academy Schloss Solitude and ZKM. But it extends into a larger practice that of creating bioplastics and really is more of a provocation about material relationships and our relationship to the creation of materials versus kind of the consumption of petrochemical plastics and how that really, is a part of systemic issues related to extractive industries and different systems. So the website itself kind of outlines protocols for creating different bioplastics. And as well as kind of like philosophical musings around that, and shows different examples of bioplastics that I've made using the different materials that are all plant-based or bio-based like gelatin, which is not just plants. But it kind of looks into also the processes and the care that's embedded into the materials when you're making them. It's a longer process of mixing, heating liquids, mixing them, pouring them, waiting for them to dry over 2 days. So it really shifts kind of our material relationships to labor, time, and consumption. And it's more almost like a meditation or a transformational practice for me, more so than I'm not trying to upscale this or be manufacturing on any level, but it's a practice to provoke these sorts of materials to kind of move into the world and be more used. Other people can manufacture them. That'll be great. That's goal accomplished, and we're seeing them happen slowly. I also play with speculative kind of fiction in my work again, so thinking about how these can be used for textiles. The fashion industry is hugely wasteful, so what are ways that we can use biodegradable materials in our garments, or could we grow textiles on our bodies? These types of things. I haven't really made practical garments out of this yet. It's been more speculative and fun and process-based. But I have some images of draping them, and I've made them as sculptural objects as well. So it's meant to kind of be more of a practice that's an open source guide to offering protocols, so a lot of other people can make these or use these materials, create and use these materials around their world for art making, objects making, etc. And a lot of people DM me and they're like, hey, look what I made using your recipe. And that's the best. I'm more really about that sharing of global community versus, having my objects on display, which is nice. This is nice. But for me, it's more about how to build a global community around these materials. Speaking of materials, moving into a project that ties into my background as Kanaka Maoli, or Native Hawaiian. And this project looks into plastiglomerate, which was first defined and discovered by geologist Patricia Kokorin and sculptor Kelly Yazvac in 2012 on Camilo Beach in Ka'u in Hawaii Island. And basically the heat from bonfires, as well as other heat, kind of melted together plastic debris that has washed ashore with sand and rock and lava to create, this is, from the South Pacific Gyre, to create this kind of new conglomerate that geologists were really excited about. They're like, oh, it's a marker for the Anthropocene. We have this new geological marker, without really ever considering the relationship to the Kanaka Maoli at all. So for us, it's really the lava, all the black rock that you see is really part of the body of the living volcanic and elemental deity Pelehonuamea, who resides in the mouth of Kilauea, the active volcano, or more specifically Halema'uma'u crater. But you can really say that any of the land on the lava on Hawaii Island is an extension of Pele's sacred body. And as Kanaka, we also look to Pele as our ancestor. So really, she's an extension of us, and so is the lava and the land. So plastiglomerate I see as more of the invasion and the melding of really like these toxic colonial and petrochemical substances with Pele and our body, almost like a desecration. So, something to consider before being really excited about the Anthropocene, as people often are. So in a 2-channel video and installation work, this body of work has spanned 2 years as well. I brought in my bioplastics and wrapped them around lava rock to really consider them as like a ho'okupu, or an offering of an alternative technology, so to speak, to plastics. What could biodegrade, what won't invade the lava and the land. And I positioned lava flows from Kilauea next to LiDAR imagery and INSAR, from INSAR technology, that I also have in a virtual gallery on New Art City, and was shown in an installation as well. And it's going to be shown in another installation in which I'll maybe tell you guys about after next month, which I'm really excited about, in person in Africa. So anyway, so the LiDAR imagery is like active lasers shooting at the land, which can also be seen as a continual invasion of the land, that's trying to predict deformations at Kilauea's summit. But really, there's no way to really predict her movements. So in the 2-channel video, it's really, there's chants being used, there's Oli that honor Pele with the lava flow, and then there's just the LiDAR data that you kind of move through as a landscape to juxtapose kind of these two belief systems. And I think it's important as we consider new ways of being, and as we can talk about dismantling systems that need to be dismantled, as a reminder that Indigenous peoples need to be included in the conversation when it comes to environmental delegations, or even these technological, the building of the geological monitoring station at Kilauea, or do we need a 30-meter telescope in addition to the 13 telescopes that already exist on Mauna Avakea? The answer is no if it's not serving a mutualistic goal with the people and the land, right? So, we've been working for hundreds of years to millennia on this in terms of worlding, this when we inherently understand and see the world as interconnected. All right, last project. This is a collaborative project with Chinchini called Kaihai, which is a hybrid of ocean in Olelo, Hawaii and Mandarin. And we've built kind of a series of virtual and augmented reality installations to utilize trans-Pacific stories from Polynesia to East Asia to kind of explore environmental issues, indigenous stories, and diaspora across the Pacific Ocean. So we started with this augmented reality installation called Nakili, which really pays homage to Hina Opuhala Ko'a, who is the goddess of coral reefs. And she's just a filter that you can, if you go to Chin Chin's IG, she's at 44ian, 44IAN. You can access the filter and really bring her to life anywhere. But she likes to be along the coast or in the ocean. And she was first kind of brought to life near Kaimana Beach in Honolulu. And I worked with also that juxtaposes humans with coral species and thinks about our interconnectedness to each other, as well as, it's fashionable, it's a good look. For our second sculpture, we looked at the submarine cables that cross the Pacific Ocean. And actually one of the first ones landed in Hawaii, but now we have this outgrowth. It's kind of like this tentacular kind of monster that's growing on the ocean floor. So we wanted to visualize that in a goddess, in like a deity, a type of deity that has been born from these telecommunications submarine cable systems. And we're just calling them OG, which takes from the acronym Asia America Gateway, which is the name of one of the Trans-Pacific cables. And currently, we're really excited to be showing them in the Epic Gallery with Peter Wu. And that is currently online, and you can access this gallery through the Gray Area Festival exhibition as well in Diorama. So Og lives there with a dialogue that is spoken that between Hina Opuhala Ko'a, Mazu, who is a Chinese sea goddess, and this new goddess. And they're discussing kind of like the growth of technology over the past 1,000 years. And currently in the Gray Area exhibition, we have one of the rooms where you can see both of these sculptures next to a video that really is just meant to highlight the dialogue that's being spoken between the three of them. So I hope you get a chance to check that out. And lastly, just wanted to say what's coming next. I'm working on a film in Hawaii. I'm going back next month that really kind of looks at the, where I grew up, which was, this is the road I grew up on, and this is like the jungle I used to play in as a kid. As you see, there's like these water pipes that run through it. They're always kind of like moving water through from the source kind of down into the city. So it's kind of looking at the elemental aqua, or the forest, the elemental gods that reside in these spaces, and how kind of there are kind of these invisible borders or these liminal spaces where they exist that you can really come in contact with. And again, how the land is an extension, how it's looking into how the land, how we're connected to the land, how it's an extension of our bodies and of us. So these are just kind of shots that I took last time with Jason Chu, and this is Lise and Sean, who are brother and sister, who I hope to be in the film. And again, thinking about the borders of the rainforest that most people don't often think about, and how to represent them visually. If you can't see them, how do you feel them? So yeah, that's my talk. Thank you so much. That's info. Get in touch.
Wonderful. That was so great, Tiare. Thank you so much. Wow, so many different projects to like think about, and some new ones. I'm very familiar with your work, and I've watched Cyanovisions Visions evolve over the years, and so it's exciting to see the new directions that you're taking, and the different ways that that project has evolved, and also how your practice has developed into different media terrains. It was really exciting to install your work with Chen Chen in the diorama show. And so just so everybody knows, I posted the links to all of those shows in the chat on the live stream. So definitely check those out. You can also go to Chen Chen's Instagram, and you can try the filters yourself. You can also check out the Epoch show and the New Art City show, which are all online. Wow, I don't even know where to begin. I think, first and foremost, in thinking about worlds and protocol, what really strikes me about your work is your ability to, as Doreen and I were talking about before, like bring tradition into new media space, bring the old and the new, and really, really uphold the integrity and the spirit of all of the stories that you're telling, from your community and of the communities of your collaborators. And I was wondering if you talk a little bit about, as we were discussing with Mori a little bit earlier today, how you bring that care to bring those stories, bring those sacred objects and artifacts, and all of those traditions into the metaverse.
I think the care is really inherent. Like, it's not something that I have to consider, really. I just put it into everything I do, whether it's a film project or an object that I'm making. I think it's inherent, and I think that's just an important principle to always remember when creating work, because if it's going to be shown publicly, whoever is receiving it will also receive the energy that you put into it. So if it's with care, they'll feel that. If it's not, then they won't. If it's, yeah.
Yeah. And I also kept on thinking about how you also tie or put together, fuse more than put just together, several areas that I find very interesting for this conversation. And how can we envision these new worlds, or I don't know if new, but at least definitely different from what we're currently living at. And I just couldn't help but think a lot about how do we integrate these non-human intelligences into the whole conversation, right? Because that's also something that is very, very, very important. And And as you were talking and showing us your projects, which I also think are amazing, I kept on thinking about how, for instance, in a lot of indigenous communities in Mexico, pretty much for most of them, there is no concept of art nor culture. Like there is not a word for it, there is no concept for that. But what we do have in a lot of these, especially within these indigenous communities and their own languages, right? So what we do have is a very, very strong connection of how can we talk about beauty and sensibility and
Mm,
aesthetics through nature. So this
mm,
connection between, of course, tradition, but then also bringing in the technology, but also bringing in these non-human intelligences, um, well, very much, everything that's not human, and not necessarily talking about, technology or so. I think it ties very nicely with that notion, because I think that in a way it's just, I think about a triangle here. Like we're talking about
mm,
how can we weave together all of these conversations for us to be able to envision these new possibilities of ourselves, of the places that we inhabit, and how can we move into these other layers of reality. And I think this strong connection that you have with biology and with non-human intelligences is something that, for me, I think is very compelling in order to connect with all of these areas. So I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how are you building these connections with these non-human entities, and what role do they play within all of your creative process, which I think that must be something that ties very strongly to certain parts of it. So
yeah, it's funny because I feel like before I started making work that really tied back to Hawaii, I was always kind of thinking with this worldview that came from growing up as Kanaka in Hawaii, which is thinking of everything is alive, having knowing that the elements are also related to a pantheon of deities or gods, and growing up with those stories, right? I grew up in this very like this space where everything was alive. That picture I showed you where I was running through the jungle, it just kind of informed my worldview. So I think when I started to make work, I couldn't help but consider the elements as being living and playing a role in things. I don't know what drew me to cyanobacteria, honestly, except for the fact that I did work in Kona on the Big Island as on a on an algae farm to grow algae to biodiesel. That's kind of my biology background. I went to school a little bit for it, but I was a lab tech. It's about 10 years ago at this point. More than 10, like just giving away my age. And it was just fascinating to see that you can grow life so quickly. We, not cyanobacteria specifically, but we're working with a similar kind of like microalgae species that would grow very, very quickly over a week to giant, like run right from like little flasks to these raceway prawns that would then make all this like this biomass that could be converted into fuel. So that was just really fascinating to me. And I think that, in addition to the Hawaiian worldview, kind of informs my work a lot, And I think a lot of us pull in our life experiences into our work. And that's really kind of like things that I'm pulling from and thinking about. Also, I guess you can see a lot of oceanic themes in my work, or this relationship to, yeah, the ocean. And that's very much, I think, from growing up near the ocean.
Wow. What's something that, I mean, the ocean is such a great metaphor because in a lot of ways the ocean, connects all things. On this, we're all made of
All
water,
shores.
salt, all shores, exactly. And on top of that, it's where all life emerged from the briny murk, thousands and thousands of years ago. And so there's a lot to be said about, finding our origin point as beings on this earth, human, non-human, living, not living. Um, and something that the whole this whole idea of worlding protocol that we're broaching at this at this festival is really about how we can really grasp all of that interconnectedness. And I really, your work with, with algae, with cyanobacteria, with these microscopic organisms that are mostly invisible, or just not thought of by the average person, unless you have some kind of, infection or something like that. Only when, these things are directly impacting you in a negative way. And I think that's really wonderful. And I'd love to, hear about how, we as artists, creators, thinkers, and just people on this earth can think in a more how we can think through that interconnectedness. We were talking about this with Mori earlier, about how we can think through the metaverse through ideas of connection and love versus ones of extraction. So I don't know. Do you have any advice for how in your work how you approach these ideas of thinking through all of this interconnectedness?
Thinking through interconnectedness.
Yeah.
It's again, I think it's like an inherent belief system. Not to keep bringing that back, but it's hard to not think of everything as interconnected, and I think because of that, because I do think I've always thought that way. I think that's why you see it being brought up so much in my work. And then I think it's important to juxtapose kind of the other world, or the separation of worlds, right? So I think that a lot of us who create digital art and we're in this, we're often online, or we're on our phones, we're on our laptops. It's all made of like earth materials, I did some research on rare earth elements before. So like little particles of metal that come together to these assemblages through these transformations of material. But oftentimes we miss, like most people miss that part. So I think in my work, I try to juxtapose those worlds. So even in the excerpt I showed you of cyanovisions, you kind of see, there's a separation between the cyanobacteria and the humans through tubes. There's kind of like a more like what's hinted at, like a more symbiotic way of like later on in the film, you just see people outside hanging out with cyanobacteria, more or less. Sorry, the lighting. And so I aim to juxtapose that with like this other character who's having like it fed into their body via the tubes. Pseudonym, who is a very talented drag performer, was in that. So that character sort of showed this other way of kind of like the dependency, like I just watched the new Dune and I was like, oh, like that scene is very like giving Harkonnen, I was very like, to drop a pop culture reference, but like, yeah, it was really giving these Harkonnen vibes. And that, in Dune, they're kind of showing like living with nature, like versus control. I think it's very much about control, extraction versus, symbiosis, mutualism. So right now, I mean, we're in a very extractive world, we're living in the systems that dominate are very extractive. So I think we have to constantly reconsider those systems and how to dismantle them, and the work just aims to do that all the time.
And also to remember that everything is just a matter of scale, really. Like there is no such thing as as an individual that has no connection to anything else. Like I remember this meme that I saw last week that a friend of mine shared. That was this image of it was an illustration of a human body, and it just does like these close-ups from the hand and from the mouth, from several places, and shows the tiny ecosystems that live there, and just adds on these quotes like we were never individuals, right? So I guess it's definitely a matter of scale, and in a way, once we understand ourselves as part of a bigger ecosystem that doesn't only encompasses our own, I don't know, like human subjectivities, I guess it's a very powerful way of also trying to not only understand how we connect with one another within the human realm, but also with what is around us. So, and I guess that sometimes we just forget to talk about like this. I don't know, like I guess the energetic balance that we are constantly trying to push into one side more than the other, right? Like this extractivist activity of, playing this role of being more than, or, being faster, stronger, bigger, whatever. And I'm forgetting about how does that look like, or how does that feel like for the other living beings around us, and what does that mean for them, like we just cannot, I don't know, like even if it's a matter of things that are in a very, very different scale than us. I think that trying to envision that somehow, I think it's something that is very powerful, and that I
You know,
definitely see in your work. I don't know, yeah.
no, Doreen, just to tack onto what you're saying, what you're reminding me of is, from the world of anthropology was, the work of Eduardo de Viveros Castro, who wrote about the, not to use a really academic term, but the ontological turn, or a shift in, the study of anthropology, where people started, where it's really rooted in a subjective position, right? Like, we're in our bodies, we're experiencing the world through our own subjective materiality. How can we understand our alterity or our difference to something else? And I've always taken that, so in my own kind of interpretation, American Anthropological Association, don't come for me. But my own, like, feeling is that, like, by and this is something that I think new media does really well, and what you do fabulously well in your work, Tiare, is by really trying to create media-based experiences that bridge different kinds of materialities: the biological, the technological, the living, the non-living, the manufactured and the natural, the artificial and the real, and also, again, in, like, to talk about what, to go back to what Doreen was saying about feeling, about what it feels like, a phenomenological approach, so to speak. What is the experience actually doing for us? And your work really does that in such a profound way. And I've always really, really appreciated that about it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So
Yeah, I wonder about the legibility and the the translatability sometimes, and if it's giving that. So
I mean, and it's also
yeah,
kind of, we were talking about tech earlier, and big tech, and how, a CEO at a major company can never understand the experience of, for instance, as Thenmori was saying, a single woman who lives in a village, and kind of the trees that she touches and the smells that she smells. And, this approach of trying to, though it's impossible, and we can never totally get there, to try at least to approach those different subjective positions, for some kind of deeper understanding. That, I think,
yeah,
that seems like a
and I think
practical toolkit for a way forward.
yeah, and I'm realizing the more that I work in kind of like film and video, the more how immersive that actually is as a medium, and how it kind of gets into people's unconscious. And I hope that these more immersive installations do that when people enter these virtual galleries, that it's somehow, if it's a CEO or like someone who's working in tech comes in, and they're like, it kind of seeps into their unconscious. I think of, to bring another Villeneuve movie into the picture. Not that I prefer Dune over this, the new Blade Runner, right? The 2049. There's the dream make. There's the character who creates dreams, kind of manufactures dreams, and I think that's really what the work is doing. Essentially, is it's well, not manufacturing, but it's creating these worlds that are reflections of reality, or kind of pulling these different notions of reality, or speculations about reality, a parallel reality in now or in the near future, or pulling from very long-standing stories that are still being told. For the Kanaka, it was all oral histories, so you didn't have visual references. You just had lived experiences, and then you had the oral histories through Olelo and Oli and Mele, and Hula. So those were, transferences of knowledges through different generations. So I really think of my responsibility or my kuleana as like to continue the trajectories of those stories and to kind of like imagine new trajectories into the future of how these stories can continue to stay alive. Because not only in Hawaii, but for many indigenous cultures, a lot of these stories have been lost, suppressed, buried. So how do we bring them back? And what are, I think of working within the digital art realm as kind of a subversive way of doing that, since it's those boundaries aren't often crossed.
Absolutely. And speaking of those stories, and I was wondering, you presented about the work in Diorama and the Epoch Gallery show, and I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about the mythology surrounding the work, surrounding the series, your collaboration with Q, because I know that you both brought a lot of your history, a lot of your community ideas and stories into this. And I'd love to give people a little bit more of an insight into it because I think it's really, really fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a collaborative work, and it started with us just really missing a home and talking about our relative homes on the coast. Q is from Wenzhou, which is a coastal city, and I'm from Honolulu. So we're like, what are the ways that we reconnect to home or re-envision home? And often it's through these stories or these, we're thinking of like, how can we create kind of symbols to, or these trans-Pacific portals represented by these different kind of symbolic sculptural gods, or that can embody these stories and help others in the diaspora kind of feel reconnected to home. That's why we wanted to go with augmented reality initially as a medium, because then anyone anywhere can pull up the sculpture and have it connect them to the coast or the ocean. So it was like a bridging of coasts and a bridging of, right, the ocean connects everything. So using the ocean as the main kind of medium that transmits these stories, and also thinking about wayfinding and how specifically, that is not an updated video. It's okay though. I thought I updated the video in the gallery. So thinking about like the wayfinding and how Polynesians came from Southeast Asia on double-hulled canoes. We talk about it in this kind of like dialogue that was traversing the ocean, right? And also, so the conversation kind of, if anyone has a chance to really like get into the gallery and listen to the conversation, it's about 10 minutes. Then you'll get more of a background on the stories that we share. I like to say stories and live, because it's not really mythology. It's like kind of like a living story that is very real. Og is a little bit of more mythos. It's speculation into like, did I cut out?
No, I just stopped my screen share.
Oh, okay. It's a little bit more of like a mythos around what this like trans-Pacific submarine cable deity could be, and what they would say, and what they would like, what they're, what are they feeling? What's their vibe? What would they look like? So I think we're both like drawing from the past and the future and stories around that.
Wow.
Stories and mythologies. Yeah.
That's amazing. Again, you guys can go to Chen Chen's Instagram. It's 44IAN on Instagram to try out the filters in augmented reality. You can also head to newart.city to see the work installed, like I just showed on New Art City. Or you can go to epoch.gallery to see the replicant show, where the sister installation is also on view. And I will note that at Epoch Gallery, Og is posed against the Hong Kong skyline. It's a futuristic Blade Runner version of Hong Kong. And in our show, in the diorama show, Nikili is posed in front of Oahu. It's a 3D scan of the island of Oahu. So both sculptures are in their native habitats at the point where the submarine cables that connect those two places and share the internet across the ocean, where they are. And so that's just I think that's a really meaningful metaphor and really speaks on a very literal level to all of the things that we're talking about at the festival. Yeah, we are we're running out of time, and so I think we have to bring in our next guest. But Tiare, is there anything else that you wanted to add about this work before we wrap, or Doreen?
Yeah, let me pull up the next. Tomorrow I'm speaking at the Ruderal Ecologies 2 conference. That's there might not. It starts really early because it's on EST. It's like out of Buffalo, New York. But if anyone wants to wake up really early, there'll be a bunch of talks, including me, in the morning. I speak at 10:45 a.m. and I know that's like probably overlapping with some gray area festivities, but that is happening tomorrow. And just a really cool conference. It'll probably be recorded, and it's looking at similar themes of symbiosis and the ruderal, like, the kind of like the essence of the earth, so to speak. And then there's the Overkill Festival that's happening it's an art and gaming festival in the Netherlands. That is curated by, I have a trouble saying his name, amazing, brilliant curator, Nikansani Makati, who put together the Masava exhibition that is going to be the first physical iteration of this exhibit, which has been online. So if people want to check out like the digital version, it's at Misava, Misava. Oh no, it's gone. Where is it? It probably still exists. Maybe I'll send you a link, Wade. But the Overkill Festival, that's coming up too. Thank you.
Don't worry. I just dropped a link to the Ruderal Ecologies Conference, and my colleague has dropped a link to the Overkill Festival. So you can head on live.greatarea.org. You can go to the chat and find those links, and we'll share those with everybody after the fact as well. Tiare, thank you.
Thank you so much.
It was so
Thank
great.
you so much.
Such an honor to be a part of this. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.